to the entertaining Talkin' Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, I am going to talk about value in the NFL draft. One thing that I commonly hear from a lot of my subscribers, obviously being that the New York Giants right now are kind of between a pass rusher and an offensive lineman in the first round. That is probably what we're looking at. We could go corner. But one thing I commonly hear from a lot of my subscribers is you can wait. You can find an offensive lineman in the second round. And before I get started and show you guys what I found and went over in my research, every draft is different. I fully acknowledge that. But I heard it last year that there were a lot of offensive linemen. I hear it all the time. So I'm going to show you the success rate of drafting not just offensive linemen, but every position in the first round and between rounds 2 and 7. Now, the way that I was able to determine this, I can't, go through every individual player. I picked out Pro Bowlers at every position that were drafted in the first round and between rounds 2 and 7 at every position for 9 consecutive years between the years of 2009 and 2017. So that's 9 consecutive drafts that I, wrote down data from. 2008 I couldn't do because they didn't break it down by position. Otherwise, I would have done 10 years. The reason I didn't do 18 and 19 is because I felt like there wasn't enough time that had elapsed, for people to make Pro Bowls. So I did from the 2009 to 2017 season, and I looked at every major position. I didn't write down the tight end, the kicker, the punter, the long snapper, but I did every other position, and I wanted to show you guys what I found and why I think you may change your mind on waiting to draft certain positions in drafts and what positions have a much higher success rate at drafting earlier on in the draft and what positions have a much less success rate at drafting later in the draft. So let's jump right into it. Let's look at what I found between the drafts of 2009 and 2017. And the way I started it was I went over the positions that had the most drafted players. And the cornerback position actually had the most drafted players over that period of time. There were 299 cornerbacks drafted over that 9-year stretch, which is a lot, I don't know, it's about 35 corners a draft on average. Of those 299 corners, 25 were Pro Bowlers. So 8.34% of the corners that were drafted in that 9-year stretch, a little over 8% made the Pro Bowl. Of the 8.34%, 15 of the 25 were drafted in the first round, which accounted for 5 of the 8.34%. 10 were drafted in the 6 rounds after that. So it goes to show you the importance of drafting a cornerback in the first round. And you're going to see discrepancies at other positions. But this showed me that it's much more likely that you're going to get a Pro Bowl corner in the first round as opposed to rounds 2 through 7. It also showed me that it's very unlikely that you'll find a Pro Bowl corner. Only 8.34% of the corners, which is going to be one of the lower percentages, were Pro Bowlers in the NFL. So it goes to show me that, yes, you have a much higher success rate at finding a Pro Bowler at the cornerback position if you draft in the first round, but you also have a much lower success rate of finding a Pro Bowler at that position entirely than other positions when you take a look at some of the others. Next one, so you could say it's a little risky to take a corner in the first round, but at the same time, if you are really in desperate need of a corner, it's probably smarter to take one early on. Next position we're going to look at is the wide receiver position. And this position is the complete opposite. Now some of the guys on the list, if I'm being fair, there was 3-4 guys maybe that were Pro Bowlers based off of special teams. Dwayne Harris, for example, was on there. But overall, I wanted to give you guys a breakdown. 270 wide receivers were drafted. 32 were Pro Bowlers. 11 were in the first round. 21, nearly double, were drafted between the 2nd and 7th round. 11.8% of the wide receivers were Pro Bowlers, but nearly 2/3 of those that were Pro Bowlers, actually more than 2/3 of those that were Pro Bowlers, were drafted between the 2nd and 7th round, which tells me you get much more value at that position if you wait and don't take it in the first round. Now, once in a while, you're going to find a guy that you can't pass up, but this is why I am always of record of saying I don't believe in taking wide receivers early in drafts, and the math backs it up. I don't believe in paying wide receivers top-tier money because I can find wide receivers like a Darius Slayton or numerous others that I could find second round or later. So that is my mindset there and why I would not be interested in taking a wide receiver early in the draft. Next one we got up is the defensive end. The defensive end has a very high hit rate. Now, some of these defensive ends may be 3-4 defensive ends, like Leonard Williams, for example, was one of them. But, for the most part, a lot of these guys are pass rushers, and some of the linebackers will be pass rushers as well. They didn't break it down by outside linebacker. But of the defensive ends, 30 were Pro Bowlers out of 218. That is a very high number. 13.7% are Pro Bowlers, which tells me this is a safer position to draft. It also shows you that it's smarter to draft one in early on. 17 of the 30 were drafted in the first round, while 13 of the 30 were drafted between the second and seventh round. 7.8% of the total 13.7% were first round draft picks. Guys like J.J. Watt, Khalil Mack, guys like that. So yes, it is more important if you're going to try to get a pass rusher to draft them early on in the first or second round, maybe. I found there were very few and far between where you found a guy outside of maybe the third round that was a Pro Bowler that was a pass rusher. So it is a safer position to draft early on, and it is more important to draft one early on in the draft if you're looking to find a Pro Bowler. But it is not the biggest discrepancy between first and second round. Next position up is the linebacker position. The linebacker, 280 were drafted, 29 were Pro Bowlers for a 10.4% rate. So it's similar to the DN. I think there were 30, but there was a little more DNs drafted. And the findings are actually different, though. 12 were first-round Pro Bowlers for a total of 4.3%, while 17 were Pro Bowlers for a total of 6.1%. So it was actually the reverse. Now, this is, of course, incorporating middle linebackers, outside linebackers, but there were obviously some pass rushers. There was a number of guys that were pass rushers. Justin Houston was listed as a linebacker, for example, Jamie Collins. But yeah, so 6.1 of the 10.4% were second rounder later. So this goes to show me that if I'm drafting a linebacker, it may be smarter to wait outside of the first round. So far, cornerback, obviously a much higher success rate in the first, but it is very risky, being that most of them historically do not work out. Only 8.3% make the Pro Bowl. The linebacker position goes to show that you should wait later in the draft. The next one up is the safety position, and the safety position, same as the other. There were 19 Pro Bowlers for a total rate of 12.3%. So that's a very high percentage of Pro Bowlers, but it was nearly double in the second round. 7 were in the first, 12 were in the second. So very similar to that of the wide receiver position and, some others. And so far, if you look at it, the safety, the running back position are positions of value. The linebacker position, positions of value. Positions you want to wait on for later in the draft. Next up, D tackle. D tackle was split down the middle. 18 Pro Bowlers out of 180. 9 were in the first. 9 were second rounder later. So maybe it's not a position of immense importance in the first round, but you don't want to wait too long. It's very hard to find a great D tackle outside maybe the second or third round, but it was split down the middle there. The next position up is the offensive tackle, and this to me is very, very interesting. Now, if you go back and you look at a position like the linebacker, for example, 12 in the first, 17 in the second to seventh. If you look at the safety position, it's the exact opposite of the offensive tackle. 7 first-round Pro Bowlers, 12 second-round Pro Bowlers, 154 drafted. Well, with the offensive tackle, the reverse, where it was 12 in the second to seventh with the safety, it's 12 in the first for the offensive tackle, with only 7 Pro Bowlers in the 9-year stretch that were offensive tackles. So less than one a draft. 10.3% of 184 drafted tackles, 12 of the 19 were drafted in the first round, which goes to show you it is a much higher success rate at that position compared to others of taking an offensive tackle. And 10.3% is not a bad percentage. 10.3% of the offensive tackles over that 9-year stretch made the Pro Bowl. Goes to show me if I'm taking an offensive tackle, even though the Giants have missed and teams have missed, your team may have missed in the past, it goes to show me that it is smart to draft an offensive tackle as early as possible. And you could say the same for the pass rusher. Next up, we've got the running back position. And the running back position, just look at that. 27 Pro Bowlers out of 190 players. 19 of them were the second round or later. Only 8 were in the first round for 4.2 of the total 14.2%. more than double were between rounds 2 and 7. So that's another position I am not drafting in the first round if I'm a GM. Wide receiver, running back, linebacker, D tackle was kind of in the middle, but there you go. Next up is the guard, and this was pretty interesting. But the Giants are not looking for a guard. But the guard had more success rate later on in the draft. Very low success rate in general, much like the cornerback position. Only 7.7% of drafted guards made the Pro Bowl. 10 out of a drafted 130. 3.1% were in the first round. 4.6 were between rounds 2 and 7. So that's a position where it's just very rare in general you find a top-tier talent. But if you're going to find one, it might be smarter to wait around, maybe second, third round. You don't want to be drafting your guard in the first. Next up, we got the quarterback. The quarterback, to me, is a position where almost everyone makes the Pro Bowl, so it's very hard to judge because people drop out. But much like the offensive tackle position, 20 of the drafted 105 made the Pro Bowl, but 12 were in the first, and 8 were between rounds 2 and 7. So much like the offensive tackle, it is smarter, if you need a quarterback, to take them as early as you can. And then finally, the center position. Look at that disparity. 56 centers were drafted over the 9-year stretch. 14.3% were Pro Bowlers. 6 of the 8 were drafted in the first round. Only 2 Pro Bowlers were found at the center position that were drafted round 2 or later. For a total success rate of 14.3%. Very high success rate in terms of Pro Bowlers, but, obviously a very small sample size. Only 56 total centers were drafted. But triple the amount were drafted in the first round as opposed to the second. So it goes to show you, for a lot of people that think that you could find offensive linemen later in the draft, well, look over that list. I think there was only 9 total offensive linemen between the tackle and center position that were found the second round or later, where there was 18, double, found in the first round. So if you're a team like the New York Giants or the Jets or any other team that needs an offensive lineman and you need to get it situated as fast as possible, if you're not going to address it in free agency, history shows that it is best to try to solve that problem in the first round. Just wanted to show you that, guys, as I've, wanted to go over that, and I'm always interested by doing things like that, so I hope you guys are too. As always, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.